Hi everyone, I'm Chris from AUDAC and welcome to a new video where I'll be showing you some of the new features that we have added to the commander function that came with our latest release of AUDAC Touch 2.9. Let's assume we have a setup with an MTX48 hooked up to the network on IP address 192.168.0.192. And I want to control that device by the commander function. First thing we need to do is, of course, add our device. MTX48 on IP address 192.168.0.192. We save it and I have control of an MTX48. I can use this device and create a dashboard with the custom widgets that are available. But what if the widget or the function that you want to control on the MTX is not available as a widget? Well, then we need to send a custom command by the commander function. The way to do this is we add a device as a commander function on the same IP address, and we have an option to specify whether this would be a linked device or a direct device. Maybe you want to have a certain overview in your device list. When I specify linked device, of course, the commander function will pop up under the MTX48. However, if I specify as a direct device, the commander function is added as a standalone device. The choice is yours. If I click on the commander function, first thing I want to do is go to the settings page. And new in AUDAC Touch release 2.9, you will find under the device tab the possibility to control your device over TCP, but also UDP, depending on what your device accepts. You specify the port. For AUDAC devices, of course, control is done over port 5001, but consult the manual of your device you want to control for the specific port it needs. I can give a custom name, so I would like to call this MTX Custom. Going back to my device list, and of course we update the database, and go back to my device, I have now a commander function or a commander device added with the name MTX Custom on the same IP address of the MTX48. And we can start by creating commands on the commander function. So back to the settings page, and you have here now two tabs. In the past this was done by creating a custom command, and you would have the possibility on your dashboard to create a certain widget that you can use to send out that command. But you were limited by one button and one command. We also have now the sequence tab, meaning that I can create multiple commands and put them in a certain sequence, meaning that if I push the button, the sequence will be executed. But first things first, let's add some commands. So let's say we want to mute zone 1. The command for this would be, of course, #pipe x001 pipe. The command is sent by touch pipe, and the command is set mute zone 1, mute active, checksum pipe, and of course always send the carriage return and line feed. This would be the command to mute zone 1. We save this, and instead of creating multiple commands for zone 2, 3 and 4, of course, I can now duplicate the commands, re-edit them, and let's say this is mute zone 2. Of course, zone 2, save. We do the same for zone 3. And of course, zone 4. So I have created 4 custom commands that allow me to mute zone 1, 2, 3 or 4. Still have to edit 4, of course. In the commander settings page, you can directly test the commands by pressing the play button. So looking at my MTX device, you will see that the zones are now unmuted. If I go back to the commander page and I click on the 4 commands to mute my zones, go back to my MTX, I can now see that all 4 zones are muted. What else do we need to do? Well, of course, if we want to mute, we also have to have the unmute command. So add a new command, which is called unmute zone 1. Again, the command would be #pipe send to x001, which is the device address of my MTX. Specify where the command comes from, touch. And here we set mute zone 01, unmute, checksum, and of course carriage return and line feed. Let's also duplicate this 4 times, so I can have my unmute for zone 2, zone 3, and of course zone 4. Again, let's test the commands. So unmute zone 1, zone 2, 3, and 4. Let's check the status of our MTX. And indeed, all 4 zones are unmuted. Now, the question pops up that, okay, on my dashboard, I can add the widget, the mute widget, but that only allows me to mute 1 zone. But I would like one button that controls all 4 zones. In that case, well, back to the commander function, settings page. We have our separate commands, but I also have my sequence tab. And by adding a sequence, I can specify, let's say, mute all zones. The steps, of course, mute zone 1, mute zone 2, mute zone 3, and of course mute zone 4. And by doing this, I have created one sequence that actually holds up 4 different commands that mute each zone. Please note that you can specify a delay by sending the commands. So after mute zone 1 has been sent, AUDAC Touch will wait 100 milliseconds before sending out the second command. It's always best to have a safe margin between the commands to be sure that your device accepts the commands. But you can play around with the delay time. By saving this, I have created the first sequence, and also, of course, let's create another one that says unmute all zones. And these steps would be, of course, unmute zone 1, unmute zone 2, 3, and last 4. This needs to be, of course, unmute zone 3. So, in the commander function, on the settings page, I have my separate commands and I have my sequences. How can you implement this in your dashboard? Well, that's very easy. Let's create a dashboard. We add a widget. First, let's take our MTX48 and add some zone sliders so we can see what the status of the mute button is. So on zone 1, of course, zone 2, 3, and 4. Let's rescale a bit. So the next step to do is, of course, add our custom command button to our dashboard. So we add a widget, we select as a device our commander device, which is our MTX custom, remember. And as a widget, I would like to have a commander button, and more specific, the sequence of mute all zones. Let's give this a label tag, mute all zones. I would like to have a second one, the unmute sequence. So I've created two custom buttons, one to mute all zones and the other one to unmute my zones. The status now would be unmuted. If I click the button, it will execute the sequence of the 4 mute commands that we have added to the commander function. And as you can see, there's a small delay of 100 milliseconds that you can play around. If I click now unmute, it will unmute my zones. That's how easy it is to implement a sequence on your dashboard. Now the possibilities here are unlimited. Let's say that you have a third-party device, a beamer that you want to control, where you first want to send out the command power on, and you know the beamer will take about, let's say, 5 seconds to boot up. So the first command would be to send out the power on command with a delay of 5 seconds, and afterwards you can send out the command switch to HDMI 1 channel. So this will give you a possibility of sending out multiple commands in a sequence on specific devices. But there's more. If we go back to our devices and we have the commander function again, settings page, you will see we have also a import and export tab. The import-export tab is wonderful because if you put time and effort in creating multiple commands and multiple sequences, and you want to share that with your customer, in the past the only way to do this was to re-edit those commands on your different touch account. This is now possible, or this is now easier, if we make use of the export function. If I want to export these commands and my sequences, click the export tab. I want to save it as MTX Education. So let's delete our sequences and also our commands. That way I no sequence or commands in my MTX custom device, but I exported and saved my commands. So I do an import and again select my JSON file, and voila, all the commands will pop up again. So this is wonderful if the community, whether you're specified on AUDAC devices or third-party devices, we can all share our JSON files maybe together to help a complete solution for your AV system. So that's what the command function is all about with the new features that came with AUDAC Touch 2.9. Thanks for watching and be sure to check out our other training videos.